My name is Alex, and I am the Program Director with Diabetes Hope Foundation. We want to thank you so much for joining us for our 7th Wellness webinar. And if you are not aware of Diabetes Hope Foundation, we are a Canadian nonprofit where we focus on transitioning youth living with diabetes. So thank you again for joining us for the next hour, where we have 4 of our alumni to talk about communications and marketing during COVID-19. We also have a very exciting program to share with you at the end of our webinar tonight, the Think the FIC $1 million Entrepreneur Growth Fund. Yes, I said $1 million. So be sure to stay tuned at the end of our webinar to hear a little bit more about that. So COVID-19 has really shocked the world and sent economies spinning. Many businesses are fighting to survive, and marketing will be an essential part of the recovery. Some businesses and organizations have thrived, while others are finding new and creative ways to stay in business. The general realization for many has been that this pandemic will affect some industries far more than others. However, I would like to share a few facts that a few industries that are thriving during this time. Some of them might actually surprise you. So number 1, the bread machine industry. Yes, I did say bread machine industry. This industry has actually increased 652% in the last year in respect to the e-commerce and online sales. So with all this time being spent at home, I guess a lot of people are doing a lot more baking and need the bread machines. So number 2, with all the bread eating, the virtual fitness training industry has also increased 307%. So I guess nobody is going to be having that quarantine 15. So guys, we might have to look into that. But in addition, there's also been an increase in online traffic for tutoring sites. Those have been have increased up to 400%, and gardening sites up to 200%. I know, Maria, you said that your brother was out gardening, so maybe
Yes.
He's been looking on those websites.
Oh yeah, he has.
But there's really something for everyone online to keep busy. So we can thank marketing for sharing with that. But in regards to the communication side of things, radio stations have also increased, and they've noticed a viewership increase by 18%. So many are turning into radio stations rather than music streaming sites like Spotify. BBC, their music reporter, said that this is probably likely due to fewer people commuting or going to the gym, as I know I'm guilty of listening Sirius, but I really tune into the radio now. But there's also is an increase of listeners because a lot of people are seeking companionship during this time alongside their music. I know I love listening to the radio hosts. They always have something funny to say to keep the mood light. But tonight, we're also going to keep the mood light, and we are joined by 4 panelists in 4 different industries who will share their insights. Our panelists, Maria, Josh, Ryan, and Serena, all have a few things in common aside from their diabetes. They're all professionals in the marketing and communications industry. So tonight, each of them will share a little bit about their profession within the sports, e-commerce and retail, real estate, and nonprofit industry. And we'll be discussing what communication and marketing looks like since COVID-19 in their respective professions. So without further ado, let's hear from tonight's panelists and a little bit about them. So Ryan, let's start from you.
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Bolta. I received my scholarship back in 2004, which was only a few years after I got diabetes. So it was one of the first really positive things that I could attach to my diabetes, which was fantastic. And it's given me something to draw on for years and years and years. I think I'm older than the other panelists, so more years than most. I work at TSN. I've worked there for 10 years now in a variety of different roles. I used to work on Sports Center. I work on That's Hockey now. I also manage the newsroom from time to time. So the hours can change a little bit, but ultimately my whole life is sports and storytelling, which is all about communication. So it made me a pretty good fit to talk on this panel, I think. It's definitely a different time now with COVID-19 keeping us all at home, but the reality is still the same of people still want to hear good stories. Alex, you were mentioning wanting to sit at home and hear the radio broadcasters telling their stories, and that's kind of what we're trying to do now. We need to tell them in a different way, but still find a way to use our storytelling skills and try to draw people into us instead of competitors. Because like you said, the eyeballs are still there. We just need to find them in a different way.
Exactly. And Ryan will be touching a little bit more on a few of those points that you talked about. So thank you so much for your introduction. Serena, I'm going to jump to you now.
Great. Hello. So for me, I got my DHF scholarship back in 2014. and I graduated from Ryerson in 2018. I've had type 1 diabetes for about 15 years now. And since graduating Ryerson, I've been able to work at We Day and We Day Live event. And of course, we'll touch on things later about this and how it's pivoting in this day and age. But, the job entailed me traveling and of course, yes, different hours. And yeah, the kind of the adrenaline of going live and such too. It's definitely been something for me to do a balancing act and adapt to different situations, and now is no different. So definitely learning as I go for this.
Yeah, I think we all are learning kind of as we figure out how virtual everybody needs to go at their job. So Josh, how about you?
My name is Josh Lutz. I was a Diabetes Hope Foundation scholarship recipient in 2009, and I've been diabetic since 2004. I graduated from Western University in London, Ontario in 2013 with a degree in finance, and I currently work on the commercial payments team at Shopify, which focuses on the pricing for our enterprise level merchants. Outside of work, I enjoy being active. I've been focusing on running a lot over the past couple of years. Just try to spend as much time outside as possible.
I think a lot of us are trying to enjoy a little bit more time outside. I know today was a beautiful day, so I hope everybody watching tonight got to get outside for just a little bit. And so last but not least, Maria.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Maria Della. I received my DHF scholarship in 2012. And I was diagnosed in Caracas, Venezuela, where I'm from, with type 1 diabetes in 2003. So I've been living with diabetes for about 17 years now, and I actually was diagnosed April Fool's Day. So April 1st is my diaversary. I went to Brock University for Media and Communication Studies, like Alex, and I graduated in 2006 with an honors degree. Now I work in Peak Property Investments, which is real estate, and it's real estate investments, and I focus more on multifamily investments. And before that, I had a lot of practice in the financial industries sector.
Awesome. So as everybody can tell, we have a variety of industries being represented here tonight. So I think it's going to create some really interesting conversation. So we're going to start off with the first kind of general question. And as we all know, you all have diabetes in common. So with everybody's routine needing to be changed as working in an office to now working from home, how's your diabetes care routine changed over the last couple of months? So Josh, I'm going to start with you on that one.
Yeah, so in terms of my routine, honestly, that's the thing that's changed, has been focusing on getting into a consistent routine, which I've found key over the past couple of weeks. Like I've really been focusing on getting like good night's sleep, which has made a huge difference. Probably been looking at my Dexcom readings way more than usual, just because my phone's always at my side. Yeah, in terms of that, just overall routine, like when it comes to meals and things like that, just trying to plan those out in advance, so I know what I need to do diabetes wise in terms of like insulin delivery and things like that.
Smart. Well, it seems like that you've got a good system now down pat. Maria, I saw you laugh at checking the Dexcom numbers, so I'm gonna jump to you now.
For me, it hasn't really changed much because before my previous job, I was in the financial industry. So I was commuting a lot downtown Toronto, but now I work from home actually. So that has been a big change. Working downtown, I guess it would have been more like stress and anxieties that would affect my blood sugar reading. So for example, in the mornings when I had to rush to go to take the train, I would get higher blood sugars because I was so like rushed. But now I find that it has been actually a lot better controlled. And like Josh mentioned, I have had the opportunity to look at my Dexcom, so I can definitely see how how my blood sugars are during the day.
Good. Yeah, it's always nice to be able to check more frequently and not have the stress of taking some public transit as well. So
Yeah.
Ryan, I'm going to jump to you next. How has your diabetes care routine changed?
I found it pretty good being at home. Maria mentioned the stress, which is interesting because when I'm at work, it can be a really high stress environment, especially when you're in the newsroom. You could be around, let's say, 30 or 40 people in the room watching 20 different games, and deadlines in my industry are 9:03 means 9:03. 9:04 and everyone's TV just went black, and there might have been 100,000 people watching it. So you do get used to it, but ultimately there are stressful moments which can definitely play with our blood sugar, we all know. Now doing all the work from home, much quieter environment. I do have an 8-month-old at home. She's my only noisy coworker now, as opposed to all of them. But I find that it's a lot more at my own speed as I need to. So as the day progresses, I'm always able to check off things, which keeps the stress level down. And also all my meals can be at the same time at home. Whereas sometimes when I'm at work and the hours are changing with my job, if I manage in the newsroom, I could be at work until 2 a.m. So dinner that night is obviously different than a night when I get home at 7 o'clock. So right now I kind of eat dinner with my wife and baby at 5:30 every night. So it's really easy, or I'll say easy comparatively, when you're taking your needles at the same times, when you're taking your night insulin at the same time. So I'm never going to bed at 3:30 in the morning, or I'm not really going, like, there's not a 5-hour switch in my day. So I found it a little bit more consistent, and I've had diabetes for 19 years now. And I've always found when I can keep it consistent and keep doing the same thing over and over again, I can fix mistakes and I can learn from them a lot easier than when I can't figure out, well, why did I go low yesterday? I can't find a pattern because my life doesn't have a pattern. So the pattern of being at home, I guess, has been kind of helpful.
Yeah, and you're so lucky that you get to eat dinner now at the same time, because even though I've been home, I'm still not eating at the same time. So,
oh, I've got to cook more, I'm barbecuing more. It's great. There are some like sneaky hidden advantages that I'll miss once life returns to normal.
I know. Too bad that this kind of being home wasn't the normal forever. But Ryan, you talk about a lot of good points about having strict deadlines. So Serena, that brings me up to you, because I know that you kind of have those deadlines and you had those deadlines before, but now how is your diabetes care change? Yeah. How is your diabetes change? You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, for me, I will say working in live events in this past year has definitely been a learning curve for me. Growing up, I'm a dancer, I've done ballet recitals and such, and like going on stage. But I think just that still that whole level of like we're live and it's a show, the show must go on. So we really cannot afford Serena, for you to go low. So make sure you don't. It's definitely kind of been a test for me, because I would say sometimes, of course, in like that live situation, I'm like, oh, I'd rather just run a little bit high than be anywhere near like a normal, because it's going to drop or anything. So that's been something, an experience that I've dealt with for this past year working with We Day. And now transitioning to more working from home. I think more so now for me, it's like I need to change my insulin a little bit, because I'm sitting in one spot for a while, and I have to still kind of remind myself to kind of get up, get moving in between, and give myself those breaks. Just because, that's another reason where I am at home. It's safe for me to like have those ups and downs a bit more, but now it's like avoiding those highs and really, and like you mentioned, like scanning our Dexcom. I have a Freestyle Libre. I scan so much now, just because I can, like right now, like, and I can see now, like I'm trying to be more proactive in it. And just kind of using this time as an opportunity to kind of like recalibrate myself a bit to get back into because this is more of a consistent schedule compared to what I've worked in previously.
Yeah, so trying to adjust to a new schedule can be a little bit challenging, I would say. So as we talk about that, and all of you have kind of mentioned how you've also been dealing with work, but I want to know a little bit more. How has your job changed since now working from home? Maria, you were commuting, and Serena, you were working back and forth with events, and Ryan, you were in a studio, and Josh, I know that we talked before and you were kind of still working from home, but so Josh, I'm actually going to start with you again on this one. How has your job changed since needing to work remotely?
Yeah, so I've actually been pretty lucky. I mean, like the core function of my role has not really changed or been affected during this time. There definitely have been challenges though, as I was commuting into Toronto since December. Prior to that, I was working from home full time. So the whole, working from home full time, I have some experience with. But yeah, in terms of, my current role, I did find that commuting time to be nice. Like it was a nice transition kind of between being home and at work. Now I've kind of found that, every work day, the entire day feels like work. So I've been trying to, like I was saying before about, having a good routine, just trying to like compartmentalize the days and, kind of have a starting point and an ending point, and try to take some breaks in between to get some fresh air and sun, to kind of reduce that feeling of being drained. And then in addition to that, just kind of focusing on shutting my laptop down at the end of the day and putting it out of sight, because there's always that temptation to open it up in the evenings. I do work with people across multiple time zones, so I do frequently get messages in the evening or early morning. So I've been trying to just, leave those for when I log on in the morning.
Yeah, and you're right, it is kind of hard to find that home work-life balance now that everybody is working remotely. So Maria, I'm going to jump to you. How has your job changed since you have had to work remotely and work from home?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I actually work from home all the time. Ever since I started, I have been working from home. However, we did have, for example, in-person meetings once a week, which we cannot have anymore. So what we do is we just have phone calls or we have Zoom meetings or anything like that. So meetings have been virtual meetings now. Also for showings. So for example, if I am helping out one of our tenants to look for a new place, showings have been totally different now. So there are virtual showings now, or we have to book in advance and we have to give a COVID-19 form. So it's actually very different in that way, but we have been actually very virtual and digital ever since I started. So we have a podcast, we have a webinars every other week. And so these things kind of keep us together and connected with who our tenants and who our investors are. And so that's our way of keeping together while we're going through this. But yeah, even though obviously seminars, it was great to see people and events to go out to them and learn more. Now it's more of a virtual setting instead.
Yeah, and I know exactly what that's like. So I'm currently in the process of moving. So all those signs or the forms and all that kind of stuff and having to do things virtually is it's a little different in the real estate world. So Ryan, I'm also really interested to hear about how your job has changed from now working in a studio to now working from home. So can you share with us a little bit more about how that's changed for you?
Yeah, so prior to all of this, my normal work day, our show would go on at 7:00 at night. So we would go in 7 hours or 7 that kind of work, and our day would kind of ramp up as it went on. And as I was mentioning before, deadlines were hard deadlines because it was TV. Like it came on I looked at my TV, like you guys might. But yeah, 7:00 meant 7:00. So everything needed to be done by then. And one good thing was, Josh was mentioning his days kind of roll over. Mine were kind of the opposite of that, where once 7:30 hit, the day was over for us. So good day, bad day, best day, worst, it kind of ended, and it didn't really extend because once your show goes off and the next one comes on, there's not really much you can do about it. So it was high stress, but also a lot of fun. We've had instances where a sports owner passes away 7 minutes before we get air. And at 7:01, we need to look like we were super prepared for that moment. So it was, you had one guy up in a suite editing, me writing. I tell the host to go get on the desk and I will bring them something and trust what I write. I have someone double checking the facts because I'm writing an obit. So you don't want to mess up who has how many kids and things like that. And you're like a duck on water where your feet are scrambling, but you need to look like you're chill when those lights come on. So that was a normal day for me. And now I sit in my basement and we try to create as much digital content as we can because I think the key is the branding of it. So for us at TSN, when we get back to work, the advertising money might not be there like it was before. So we want our brand to be strong enough that whoever can still advertise, they want to choose us over the other guys. The content that we put out, whether it's on TV, digital, wherever, Instagram, Facebook, could be anywhere, ours is the best and we do it better. So how can we keep outperforming? So now what they took away from us, they took away from everybody. It's not like we can't go to our studio, but our competitor can. I don't know if you guys have watched Mad Men before. In the beginning season of Mad Men, they mentioned it's the cigarettes. And they said that they actually did us a big favor because what they took away from everybody, that they can't advertise that they're safe, nobody can say it. So now we can say whatever we want. So it's kind of the same thing here. They took the same advantages that we had away from everybody. So now we're working from scratch. So if we work harder and better than everyone, we can really strengthen that brand. So when we come back, now we're the people that everyone wants to come to. So that's kind of what I'm trying to create every day, just from my basement in a lot quieter and less stressful of an atmosphere than I would if I was at the studio.
That's so incredible to hear and so different. And it kind of sounds like Microsoft and how that started in the basement. So yeah. I'm hoping some great things come out of what you're doing. And again, so Serena, I'm going to move to you. How has your job changed since the beginning of all this?
Well, working at We Day is definitely, it's a live event and a live event that traveled. So definitely two areas that have drastically changed. And I will say, yeah, coming off of doing a We Day UK, we weren't sure what was next. There was a lot of uncertainty with that. And now they've pivoted to going online, of course, and really increasing the amount of content they output online, because that's now the main channel that they're working with, in tandem with actually now using We Day has in the past done TV broadcasts. And so now in this time, we're transitioning to kind of in lieu of, people's graduations and proms, we're putting together something that celebrates, the end of high school and just all the impacts that youth are making currently and in the past school year. So that's essentially kind of how it's definitely changed. We're going digital, and I don't work directly on this, but other teams are putting together daily digital content, digital shows. And then leading up to this television broadcast, my team is also putting together these big digital shows that will, in lieu of a We Day California or a We Day Illinois, we're putting together We Celebrate California, We Celebrate Illinois, and kind of lead up to this television broadcast in Canada.
Wow, there's so many incredible things. And I know I have a more specific question in regards to the We Celebrate, so I'm going to hold off for now. But as all of our viewers can tell, all of our panelists tonight are in complete different industries. So personally, I have so many questions running through my head. But Josh, I'm going to move to you because I'm such an online shopper. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm really curious to know. Yeah, same Maria. I'm really curious to know, and because you kind of work on the online e-commerce world is what you do you think that more retailers and other businesses will move to the online storefront even once stores begin to open up and open their doors to the public?
Yeah, I definitely see that trend continuing for sure. I mean, for businesses that previously only operated out of a storefront, that are now shut down in most cases, they're able to massively increase their addressable market by moving online. I mean, like a good example, think about like a clothing shop with one location in downtown Toronto. Even though Toronto is a massive market, if they go online and sell their products online, they can easily reach customers all across Canada, and then even on the other, eventually on the other side of the border as well. So I think for some verticals where consumer spending is decreasing during these times, I mean it's vital for those businesses to attempt to reach as much of their target market as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. So kind of going off that question, this is a question for everybody to answer. As these stores continue to open, are you more likely going to shop online, or are you going to actually go into these physical brick and mortar stores? So Serena, I kind of saw you smile there. What are you thinking?
I mean, I'm already an online shopper in many respects, but I do love the in-store experience. And even like for me, when I was in university, like I've worked in retail before, and like I know like how like it is a different type of experience that you get in store versus online. And I feel like I feel like maybe my parents would definitely want that in-store experience, as they are struggling to get me to figure out their online orders. But I feel like, yeah, for me, I would be excited to go back. Of course, though, like it's still like, it seems like we have to still take those precautions and everything. So online shopping is still going strong, and will continue to go strong.
I love that. Now, you talked about the interaction and the interaction with people. So actually, Maria, that brings me to your next question, specifically about your industry. So since you're no longer able to communicate face-to-face with your tenants and show them properties and all that kind of stuff, what do you find is the best method to communicate with them to make sure that they're getting the best experience possible?
Yeah, so normally actually what we do is we don't really do tours or showings or anything, but I am helping some of our tenants that want to move into other properties look for those showings. So what I am focusing on is, for example, I'm actually helping some that are older age people, as well as people who have emails. So those who are older don't even have emails. So that has been a little bit hard. But my bosses, what I do is I come up with spreadsheets of, for example, the locations, what they have, the price, all of the characteristics that they would have. And then what they do is I print it out, or actually my boss prints it out and brings it to them and leaves it on the porch. And then what they do is they see it and we talk about it on the phone. So that has been a little bit different, because obviously if we were able to see, I would sit down with them and try to go with it with them one-on-one through them, and even with a computer so they could see the photos. But if they need, for example, they actually see their own locations as well, so properties that they like through their they do have an iPad. So what they do is they look at them, but sometimes they don't have for example, a phone number for them to connect to. So what they do is they call me, and I look at them, at the information, and then I actually end up emailing the landlord. So it's that type of thing that has been a little bit different. It does take longer now because obviously if they're having showings, a lot of properties actually have either virtual showings or individual showings, whereas before they used to have group showings. So now it's a bit different, because obviously they have to be more focused individually rather than just as a group. So yeah. I think that those are the biggest changes that I've seen. And obviously, going to see a property is very different as well, because you can be touching around, you can be seeing things like that. Whereas before you would just like, I don't know, if it had a fridge, you would just open it. So things like that have changed, and people have to be very wary and sure that people who are, even if they're asymptomatic, but they have been, for example, outside of the country in the past 14 days, they have to be able to say that in the COVID form. So if you know anyone who is close to you and that you've been close with that has been diagnosed with COVID, then you have to inform them as well. So I guess that those are the things that before, obviously, you wouldn't have known and you wouldn't have asked. But now it's a rule that we have to make sure that these things are in place.
Mm-hmm. There's so much communication involved too now with everything happening. So it's really good that you're managing things and doing things for your seniors that are just helping them out a little bit more, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's honestly, I love helping them.
I know, it's so sweet, and they really do appreciate it. So jumping to, I guess, another different topic, because everybody's in a different profession. So Ryan, I'm going to jump down to you again. With everything that's going on with your job, and you said that you're creating different things. You also mentioned before that you work in the hockey division of TSN. What are some things that you're doing to keep your audience engaged? I know that when we were talking yesterday, you mentioned a few interesting things that you were doing. So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more about that.
So when we were at work, our show was half an hour long. So it would always air from 7 to 7:30 Eastern time. And what I helped come up with, I guess, is a digital show. So there's not half an hour of content right now, but there is definitely content. Some of it, I'll say, we manufacture. So we might start a debate that we might not normally have on who's the greatest player of all time, let's say, something very generic. But for sports-starved people, they'll watch that debate right now. So I put a collection together of all the things that we've done at TSN during the day and all of the news. And a lot of the news that we have now is what phase is the league at and trying to get back to play. Everyone just wants to know, am I going to see hockey again this year? And if I do, what's it going to look like? How are they going to go about it? It's going to change, of course, but all of those different things. So we're trying to update people on that news as much as we can. But what we've created is a 5 to 6 minute show that all goes online. That we try to make look as close to what our actual show at work would be. The only difference is our host is sitting in front of his bookshelf at home instead of in our nice studio. But all of the rest of the content, we try to get to match the quality that we would have at work. So you get this 6 minute or 5 minute package of the best stuff that day. So if you're a big hockey fan, we've been getting a lot of views on tsn.ca and on Twitter of people checking it out, because I still go to ESPN every single day, even though none of the leagues I watch are playing. Out of habit, out of hoping that I hear good news, out of rumors, it's just what I do. It's what sports fans are bred to do. So to my point that I made earlier, we're all kind of in the same boat where we can't talk about games right now, but that doesn't mean we can't story tell. And that's what was taught to me very early at TSN. It was like, we're not highlights. Anybody can get their highlights from anyone. The highlights look the same everywhere. It's the stories that you can tell differently. So if anything, taking the highlights away from everyone has given me almost a leg up, because I think that we tell stories better than everyone else. And that's all we can do now. There are no highlights to fall back on. So we have 6 minutes to tell the best stories we can. And the show's been doing really well. It's not what it normally is. It can't be. But what I mentioned earlier about the branding is we want to be as strong as we can and prove to people that give us the worst circumstance you can, and we're still going to make something really cool out of it. So make sure you stick with us, because when we get back to having all of our weapons, when I'm not trying to edit this from my couch with an editor on the phone and I can't see him and he can't see me and those sorts of challenges, we're not in the same room. If it looks good now, just wait until we're back to full strength. So that's kind of where we're at. Tricking yourself into it being a positive, I guess, is one way that I've found healthy to get through it a bit. I find a lot of the news can be scary, and that's not to turn a blind eye to it, but when you hear the numbers of how many people are going to get it and us all having diabetes here, it would be pretty serious if we get it, and it could be very scary. So some of the things that I've tried to do is just try and pour myself into my family life and my work and try to be as positive as possible, as often as possible, to see what we can do with that way. Because some of those sad realities, although you can take caution, you mentioned about going to stores earlier, I've avoided them all. The Amazon guy lives on my front step. But I mean, all we could try to do is be positive, right? So trying to take that to work. And I've found that it's almost helped at work because you have a lot of people being down and a lot of negative stuff. If you could be the person that zags instead of zigs, try to help more. So then when you get back to work, personally, you've done well for yourself, and professionally, hopefully the whole business can be as strong as possible.
Brian, you bring up so many good points, and I love everything that you shared. And you're right, trying to keep a positive attitude with everything that's going on is really important. So that actually brings me to Serena. So Ryan, thank you for that great story and about what you're doing, because it really explains kind of what Serena does. And Serena, that leads me to your question. With everything that you talked about with We Celebrate, can you explain a little bit more about that and trying to keep the positive vibe going with everybody and trying to uplift your audience?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely, as even for like the show We Day, it's all about, celebrating and encouraging the youth to give back, to make those social impacts. And I think now more than ever, it's given the current climate too, it's just like we still should have a reason to celebrate after all they've accomplished. And what graduations and proms are different, and this time around, and we still want to make sure that we can still celebrate those very important moments. And even, right now that, they can't necessarily walk across the stage and get their diploma. Like you see all these people putting together their own makeshift, walking across, getting their own little diplomas, or putting on their prom outfit still kind of celebrating those really, really important moments, really fun moments. And it is like during this time, it's really important to find the fun wherever you can, safely, and that's really all that kind of matters. So that's kind of the main thing with We Celebrate. It's kind of like how we had the broadcast of Stronger Together, and I know there was a Global Citizen one too that did more of a worldwide one. This one is more like focused in Canada and focused for the students, for high school students, for any students that are kind of graduating and going through this time, and they're trying to figure out, okay, so what next, what now, even though those feelings are already there in a regular situation. I think they're even magnified even more given this current climate. So it's just giving another reason to why we need to find the other reasons to celebrate.
Yeah, and I think you're right, but that's so awesome what We Day's doing, is doing the We Celebrate, because a lot of people don't understand that graduation and prom is such a big milestone. So being able to share that with others and being able to celebrate is, I think, an awesome initiative that We Day is doing. So thank you for doing that on behalf of all those who get to now celebrate because of you guys. So I'm going to actually jump to more of a marketing and advertising question, because again, that's what we're here to talk about. So in regards to your jobs, or whether you've seen in person with what you've been doing, have you noticed a change in marketing and advertising, whether you've seen an increase in ads, decrease in ads, sponsorship, all that kind of stuff? So Maria, I'm going to jump up to you and then we'll continue from there.
Yeah, so for me, it hasn't changed because thankfully our company my bosses have, I guess, investors that want to invest in it. So obviously all of the money is recycled in a way. And then that's where I come in with putting digital advertisements and digital marketing out there. So right now, what we want to focus on more is Facebook ads. So what we are trying to do is just to make sure that people out there get awareness of who we are and what we do. But I think that it has been used, I guess, in this sense, a little bit more because people are online a lot more, so digital a lot more, but then also with advertisements, it's a little bit different because for big companies, you have to get that approval of the money, so and the budget. So that would be a little bit harder with bigger companies. But for our company, since it's a small boutique, it has been working well, and it's something that we have been using, and we're going to continue actually using further during this time.
Great. So it's really nice that Facebook ads are there because it's not too expensive. And you're right, with the smaller companies, it can be a little easier. And with the bigger companies, obviously they have bigger marketing and advertising budgets. And that's probably the first thing to be pulled a little bit tighter on the purse strings. So Josh, I'm going to jump to you next. Have you seen an increase, decrease marketing and advertising with what you do?
Yeah, I mean, like on a personal level, I've noticed a huge rise in email marketing. I think, within the first couple of weeks of, this whole, situation evolving, I think I received an email from every company or brand that I've ever given my email to, which, seemed to be, giving the same message. I think, within that, there were, some companies that, were communicating an important message. I know specifically for, diabetes supply companies, they wanted to, ensure that their supply, ensure their customers that their supply chains were all right, and that they would be able to, regularly, purchase and have their supplies delivered. Since then, I've, kind of noticed that those mass email messages have calmed down a bit. And I think there's just been, more of a focus on not creating too much noise. And then I think, while people's attention spans are a lot shorter when it comes to browsing the web, I find that, like with myself at least, I'll take the time to read an email if it's one that I've, signed up to receive. So I think in terms of, being able to, have customers and potential customers actually, read your message, I think, email's been a good tool in that sense.
Yeah, and I think you're right on both points. I mean, I have never gotten so many emails from places that I've shopped from, but I don't think I've ever hit unsubscribe more times in my life than now. But at the same time, it's interesting when you talk about taking the time to read the email. So this time has really taught us to stop and smell the roses, or I guess, Josh, in your case, to stop and read the emails. So it's interesting how it really changes for everybody. But I agree with you. Email marketing is a really great way nowadays because we're all on our phones. So Serena, how about you? What have you noticed in regards to marketing and advertising change?
For myself, and like what I've just noticed too, I see like a lot of, like, even with commercials and any of the ads, like I do see them being very careful in the kind of how they, send out their messaging, and also to still make it relevant to the current times. And I could see with almost any or all commercials in a given like show that I watch on TV, a lot of them are relevant, or they make it relevant, the fact that they're changing their practices or they're adjusting to what's currently happening and then ensuring everyone's safety. So they're keeping those kind of key messaging of like, we understand things are different right now, and this is how we're adapting to those situations. So I would definitely say that's something I've noticed with a lot of marketing and like the commercials that I've watched and seen. It's definitely they're being cognizant about the timing of them showing this commercial as well. So
yeah, and I also have to agree with you, and I don't watch a whole lot of TV. I'm guilty of binging Netflix and Amazon Prime. So but I have noticed an increase in those I guess more those advertisements that are geared towards this time on radio. So it kind of works both ways, which is really interesting. So Ryan, also, what have you noticed the change in advertising and marketing, specifically in what you are doing?
A lot of our industry most of our industry is based on advertising. So the bigger the event, everyone would know that probably the Super Bowl is the biggest, and you hear about the multi-million-dollar commercials. So that would be the ceiling. And then the lesser the event that we thought was the worst case scenario, what turns out to be the worst case scenario is no event at all. So obviously TSN and all of the stations like that, sports specific, are struggling with advertising revenue just because there aren't the sports. You've seen the UFC recently trying to jam in their events, trying to do everything they can to make sure that they host them. It's because they know that they could get the biggest numbers they can because no one else has anything else to watch. NFL had their draft a few weeks ago. It was their highest watched draft of all time, and it was the commissioner sitting on a couch in his basement just reading the picks. That was it. It was no flash, none of the anything. And they trumped their number. It wasn't close. So it's just everyone's starving for it, but no one's there to advertise because there's nothing to advertise. We're showing basketball games from when the Raptors won last year. And while someone might tune into that, you could find a replay of any game you want from a year and a half ago if you look hard enough on your own. So there's just the numbers aren't there. A big company like ours, if they lose their advertising for 3 months, 6 months, it becomes a problem of paying all the employees because they're banking on having that money. My show specifically, I mentioned it was That's Hockey. It's actually 7-Eleven That's Hockey. So we always have a sponsor for the show. So they've paid for a year worth of having us say 7-Eleven every time we say That's Hockey. So think of during the show for half an hour, all of our graphics pages say 7-Eleven on it. Whenever our host says it, 7-Eleven's on it. And now we haven't had a show in 2.5 months. So that's where this digital one came from because we called it 7-Eleven That's Hockey Online. So we could go to them and say, hey, we're trying. We're doing everything we can for you, short of doing what we actually promised you. So they've been really happy with how hard we've worked for them. So hopefully it keeps their contracts up at the end of the year. So check back next year and see if the show has this. And that'll prove whether they were happy enough with it. But that's kind of where we're at, is trying to, like I mentioned earlier, I think everyone realizes that we're in tough times, but the harder we work for them, we can try and keep those relationships. The one other fear, I guess, would be that we've seen some companies fold. Now, a lot of them are smaller companies that haven't been able to make it through this time. But my fear would be even the bigger ones, everyone's taking a loss, big or small. Not everyone. Josh, you guys are doing great. Most companies are taking a loss. But so if you are a company that's taking a loss, is it your advertising budget that takes a hit? If you had 50 million to spend on advertising, are you only spending 25 now? So if there's less money to spend, or people are paying less money on ads, or less people come to us to spend that money, that could create a major problem. So for us personally, the faster sports could come back, fans in the seats or not, it doesn't really matter for us personally, because we're all going to watch the games. If the Maple Leafs played tonight, it would be the biggest number of the season. So we could get big advertising money on that. So that's what we need. But in the meantime, all we could do is try and strengthen those relationships with people and prove that if they come back with only half their advertising budget, don't take it from us, because we're the guys that you want to stick with. Take it from the other guy.
Yeah, and Ryan, that's a really good point. I think I should have added advertising 101 to this because, Ryan, such great points. I know that, smaller companies, unfortunately, are not doing so great, but maybe it's their advertising that should be the first thing to go. So that's really interesting. But Ryan, I'm going to ask you another question because you talk about rewatching sports, and it's funny. I remember the very last game that I watched was the Toronto and Hurricane game with that Zamboni driver of a goalie. I will forever remember that being the last game. I feel like that was so
long ago.
I know.
I'm a Leafs fan as much as I work in the business too, so that's not the best example.
Well, I don't know. I don't watch sports.
Continue your question.
But the question that I have for you is, what do you think hockey is going to look like after all of this?
I hope they play this season. I hope they find a way. Anything I know from our insiders is what they're trying to do is come back in 4 cities only. So there's 4 divisions in hockey. They're going to try to do it in 4 cities. They're going to call them hub cities. So they're going to try to find the 4 cities that are most well-equipped to handle this. So, for example, Edmonton is one that has been pitched where they have their brand new arena right beside a hotel that is owned by the owner of the Edmonton Oilers, right beside their practice facility. So they could bring in 8 teams there and handle a quarter of the hockey, and nobody has to leave this little bubble. So they're essentially self-quarantining, but playing hockey games. So if they could do that in 4 cities, they're never going to be able to do it in 31 cities. Even if they jump straight to the playoffs and they try to have a 16, 20, or 24 teams, it's still too many cities. We've seen in the United States, a lot of states have handled this very differently than others. Like New York has 2 teams. It would be very difficult to go play hockey games in New York anytime soon, I would imagine. The southern states, same sort of deal. So it looks like a lot of the ones they're considering are in the northern part where it's gone, I'll say, well, comparatively. But yeah, they're trying to see if that works. But you also have players who went back to Europe to be home during all of this. So when you bring them back, do they have to do the 14-day quarantine? What if a player gets it in the middle of playing hockey? There's so many questions. But I think that I would speak for most sports fans when I say that it'll be eerie watching a game with no crowd. But I'd certainly take a game with no crowd over no game at all right now. So that's a view that I have as a person in the industry, where it would be very good for my career and my company if games were played, but also just as a fan, I just want to watch them play. I read on college football a lot. College football doesn't start till September, and they're already talking about, do we have to cancel? Do we have to postpone? Do we have to no fans in the seats? And I'm like, one of my favorite things is going to those games or watching them on TV. I was like, just let me see them somehow or some way or another. So that's it. I really hope we get to see hockey. I hope that 4 hub city idea works. I think we want to see someone win a Stanley Cup. Like, people watch it, especially in Canada. Like, people kind of get behind that. Even people who don't really love sports kind of like seeing people win trophies and be happy. And now more than ever, I was mentioning earlier, being positive. There's not really anything more positive than watching someone accomplish the biggest goal in their life and celebrate it and cry on TV. Like, couldn't we all kind of use that right now? So here's hoping the idea works and they do come back.
Yeah, and again, it would be really eerie watching a game with no audience, and I couldn't even imagine them doing like the CGI with the audience in the background. So I'm hoping it doesn't come to that, and we can all get back to having fun at the games. So we are just going to be wrapping up here soon because we are coming close to the end of our time. But in regards to keeping the audience engaged, Serena, I'm really interested to hear, since you are such an event-based organization and now you've moved everything online, what are you doing specifically to keep your audience engaged with all your virtual programming now?
Well, one thing about it's actually the umbrella is like it's under the We organization. And so there is a couple of pillars amongst the We organization that We Day kind of can tap into as well. They do have curriculum and programming with their We schools, and that's how they've been really trying to engage, especially now more than ever, engage students to continue that conversation of how they can still make an impact. There are so many amazing stories, even when I'm now doing my research for our shows too, is that there's so many young people like making masks, sewing masks. If they have access to a 3D printer, they're coding something. They're rising to that challenge, and it's definitely something that's why obviously we'd want to celebrate that too. So I think as a matter of just kind of how we keep them engaged is they're already so engaged in different platforms already, given our target audience being young people. And now that we have to go to these platforms to have these kind of have face-to-face conversations and stuff too, and everyone's still staying connected in some way, shape, or form. Everyone's in front of a screen, and so it's a matter of just kind of making sure that we continue that conversation and continue highlighting and encouraging, maybe like asking those questions of how can we get involved, what are ways we can get involved, and kind of just really still create that community with young people.
Yeah, and those are all really good points as well. And so, Maria, I'm going to pass it up to you as well. Is there anything that you're doing specifically to keep, I guess, your tenants engaged or potential tenants engaged? I know that's a little bit of an odd question, but I wanted to make sure that you got your word in. So just a few short words before we wrap up.
Yeah, so for us, it's not as much tenants because we're constantly, I guess, speaking with them. It's more about investors or partners that we want them to continue being engaged, even though right now it is a difficult time. But we do actually, so my bosses have a podcast, the Canadian Multifamily Investing Podcast. And so it's all about multifamily investing. And so they do a lot of shows where they have other investors come in. So that is a way for audiences to keep engaged. We also have, like I mentioned, every other week a webinar now. So, so we speak about a lot of the things that investors and my bosses are also doing. And then we also have a Facebook group for apartment building investing network. So that's actually for all investors in the apartment building sector. They can continue being involved in getting more information about times like these. Obviously, there are people who are going through it. And obviously, if you want advice, the best way for you to get advice would be from other people that are going through it as well with you. So those are a few little things that we have been doing just to keep everyone involved. And thankfully, everyone has been actually very thankful and very active online.
Great. Well, there's so many different ways to bring people involved, in the seminar/webinars now in the podcast are a really good way. So Josh, what about you? Any final last brief words before we wrap things up?
No.
Yours is a little different, being e-commerce based. So it's kind of hard to keep people involved that way when actually they're just coming to you. So with that being said, we will wrap it up here. So I wanted to thank you all for joining us for tonight's webinar. I really hope that you all learned a little bit about the different industries that we had represented here. So again, thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights. Now, as promised, the little tidbit of the program that I'm going to share, the Thinkific, and yes, that's right, it's Thinkific, so I kind of think of like Think of It, the $1 million Entrepreneur Growth Fund. And this program is actually launched to help eligible entrepreneurs rapidly create and market online courses. So the goal of Thinkific is to boost momentum and for entrepreneurs starting online businesses to really see them succeed through this crisis. So if you're wondering, where can I find more information, Alex? I'm really interested in this. Go to www.thinkific.com. So thinkific.com. We'll also be sharing the link on our website, so be sure to check it out for more information. So thank you again so much to our panelists, and thank you to all of our viewers for joining us tonight. See you all next week, and I hope you all stay safe and healthy. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.